Rich, you deal with these soul passages all the time. What's your experience as low souled?
Well, I had one last night. I crossed over some Hawaiian souls, about 200 of them. They were in a soul group. And it really depends on, the farther back you go in time, the more primitive they are in their consciousness. But there's, I've been following them down into the Book of the Dead and observing and asking questions so I could learn about what happens to the souls. And last night I boo-booed. I was following this vortex and I got into the wrong rabbit hole. I ended up below the heart chakra of Earth Mind into some dark area of beings that weren't very friendly. Mm-hmm. And I immediately excused myself and got the hell out of there.
Sorry, wrong neighborhood.
I got the wrong neighborhood. You're in the wrong hood, man.
Oh, yeah. When I was first learning how to move through the chakras and read these levels of consciousness, I blundered down in there, too. And I was caught. I was just fighting the demons tooth and toenail, and I was in my easy chair, and Jane was sitting nearby me while this was going on. I was in deep meditation, and if it hadn't been for her coming in and also giving me the energy to pull out of there, I don't know what would have happened. It really gets weird, doesn't it? That's why I warn everybody not to go below the heart chakra level in that third dimensional reality, that the chakra system that exists below your feet, the earth mind chakras. You can work in the upper levels quite safely because that's the consciousness of earth mind, and there are a lot of positive things there, like positive nature, of course, or mostly negative polarity. But things like the earth divas and things of that nature, and there are beings that's their level of specialty too, is in that level of consciousness to help out with things. And so when you learn to communicate with them, you can get a lot of assistance there. In fact, in our shows that we do where we're working with the earth energies, we get a lot of help from them, just in intuitive knowing by being able to clairvoyantly or clairaudiently tune into them to what Earth Mind wants. That's how they communicate with us, is telepathic communication. And it's not like they communicate with a language. Again, it's feeling. Those subtle feelings that you can rise to your mind that extrapolate out into something that makes sense that you can deal with.
Hey, Frank, I got to tell you the story about my father when he died, his low soul. He had a brain aneurysm, so he was in the hospital, unconscious, in kind of a coma, and I got a chance to say goodbye to his low soul, and brought my daughters into the hospital with me, and then my relatives, the deceased relatives, high souls, they came in. They were all in. It was a whole room full of spirits in this place. I hope nobody from the outside was listening to what I was talking about. But anyway, after I got done crossing my father's soul over, and I asked him, what did you learn in this lifetime? And, I said, you were really mean to me. You treated me very harshly, and I was your caregiver for like 2 years, and blah, blah, blah. He goes, well, I think I've learned not to be so stubborn now and be more loving. I said, good lesson. So I after that, I went over to his house, and he died. He passed away. And then the next day I went over to his house, and I opened the front door up, and there he was standing there. He goes, what are you doing in my house? Get out of my house. And I said, you're dead. He goes, I'm dead. And I said, oh, he had a split low soul. He had two low soul, split soul. So I said, yeah, and so I created a vortex and sent him back to the Book of the Dead. And after that I could walk in and there wasn't anybody telling me what to leave again. Mm-hmm. But he had this, man, he was so mean that he changed the locks on the house 3 times so that I couldn't get in So when he died, I had to have the fire department come and break the front door down to get him out. It was quite an experience to work with him, but I learned a lot from it. You helped me through a lot of that. And, but the low soul is quite different than the high souls. Boy, I'll tell you.
Well, it just makes us realize how much more there is out there in those subtle energy realms that we just don't experience, have any comprehension of. What the Hindus and the foreign religions do, and the people who study this stuff, like the Tibetans and things, they know this stuff, surely by now, and have passed it along, but we sure have not gotten it into our American and English consciousness over here.
Well, when you're with somebody and they're dying and so forth, and we've been told to tell them to go to the light. Wouldn't a high soul already know where to go? So in a sense, you're telling the low soul then to go to the light?
Are you talking to me or Frank?
Whoever wants to grab it.
Frank's obviously taking a call. So, Rich, you're the man.
Well, okay. So, normally, if a person is spiritually minded, their high soul will cross over because they've already prepared themselves. The low soul is what usually gets stuck because it's the animalistic instinct consciousness, and that's the one that I cross over more than ever. So that's when you need help with when they're dying, is say, okay, it's time for you to go. And what I'm finding is that many of the low souls, they don't really necessarily see a light. I think it's more of a frequency vibrational thing they follow into earth mind. Because I create a vortex and send them down into the Book of the Dead, but it's more of a sound, it's a real low frequency vibration compared to the high souls.
So then would you tell them, instead of following the light, to follow the heartbeat, per se? The vibration of the heartbeat? Well,
what I do is I bring up one of their relatives, their ancestors, through the vortex to greet them, just like an angel would greet your high soul. And I just bring in an ancestor, like the Hawaiians last night. I brought an ancestor in to greet them, so they weren't afraid. And I said, now follow your ancestor back to the Book of the Dead. And I create the vortex and they leave. And that takes all the fear out of them, because they don't know what to expect. They don't know what, you would think that they had been taught about this stuff, but they hadn't. Even the kahunas here that taught, the kahuna, many of them still didn't understand it. And they just didn't understand that we do have a low soul. They were taught about reincarnations, but they didn't understand the concept that the low soul goes into the Book of the Dead where it's reincarnated. A high soul doesn't, it goes in, it joins later with the body after it's, when it's born. So, like Frank was saying, the Eastern religions understand this, but they write it in such a context that I find it very difficult to follow because the terminology is so foreign to me. So, and that's, I was on the phone on Skype working on a guy just before I came on, and he was rattling off all this Indian terminology to me because he'd studied all this stuff. And I said, you lost me, man, because I didn't study that stuff. But when he started to explain to me, then I understood what he was saying. So, yeah, the education process of the low soul, over here in Hawaii, very few people understand it either.
Mm-hmm. Well, that surprised me, since they generally had a better concept of things before the missionaries came and taught them the ways of God.
Well, everything before the 1700s, they practiced huna, and they understood some of it. But once the Christian missionaries came in and they started believing that there was, they were only going to go to heaven or hell, they kind of got lost on it. It's pretty interesting because I crossed over a whole congregation of of the Congregationalists. They were the low souls of the Congregationalists. There was about 100 of them, and they'd been here for 250 years or so, and they didn't know anything about Jesus. They were low souled, because the low soul doesn't understand about spirituality. Unless the high soul is disciplined the low soul to communicate with each other, they're pretty much kind of like an animal, almost, in their consciousness.
I think that's what it is that most of us have a hard time differentiating between the high soul and the low soul. And that's where I think a lot of trip-up begins.
Well, it's very difficult for anybody to understand it if they've been in any kind of religion, because religion only doesn't even know how to define the soul to begin with. And then everybody equates when they die, they're going to go to heaven, which they equate to be in the higher realms of consciousness.
Well, now, yeah, but they've been told that by someone who thinks they understand, the religious people who think they understand that everyone goes and sits at the right hand of God in paradise forever. Well, that's just simply not true. That's not how it works. What's your experience of the afterlife? Well, let's get into that. That ought to be fun.
With me?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I just crossed a couple groups over this week, and I went into the higher realms with them. And the last group, they were Hawaiians. They had died from 1970 to 2012. There was about 2,000 souls. And I got together with they always have somebody that's spokesman of the soul group. So I created a vortex, and I said, I'm going to go with you. I brought one of my angels with me to keep the portal open. And I went in there, and I walked into this huge area, and it was like, what happens was these souls, it's a big soul group, and they all kind of divide into groups. And I was in a group of 10 with 10 souls. And they were dressed in white robes. It was kind of like a crystalline, it was more of a translucent type of a building where you could, with grids in it. And then people would sit together and they would commune. They would share their experiences about what they did on Earth. And they would get through a group of 10, and then they would rotate into another group. And it was kind of interesting because one person would come up and say, you remember the time that I did this and this with you? And I'd say, well, I was part of your soul group, and I came here to teach you a lesson about something, and this is how you responded to me, and blah, 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 blah. And it was like they were just interacting. And they did that for a long period of time. I said, I'm not gonna, you guys don't have time up here, but I do. So let's fast forward this sequence. So this, guardian or angel I was with, he says, okay, let me show you what the end result is. And at the end result was, each soul was kind of like in front of a board of elders, so to speak, of about 6 people. And they said, okay, what do you want to do in your next life? This is how far you've evolved. It was kind of like, it's your choice. What do you want to do? Where do you want to go? Do you want to stay in this soul group? You don't have to stay in this soul group. You can go somewhere else based upon your evolution. It's like we have the power, we have the freedom. Our souls are the judge, jury, and executioner of what we want to do. So we have a choice of what we want to do. That's what really frees me up, because I realize how much power we really have as souls. Mm-hmm. And we get to choose what we really want to do. We're not told by God what to do. We're part of God. And we do use the Prime Creator's energy to exist, but we're also part of the whole, and we have a say in what we do. And it's very, very interesting, because the high souls, they go to a completely different realm of, and what was really interesting is my father-in-law, he died about 10 years ago, and he comes and visits me periodically, and I wasn't able to reach him the last 6 months. I just couldn't find him. When I go up into like the 5th dimension, and I would sit up there and I'd ask to find him. So I went up into another higher dimension, and there he was. His name was George. And I said, hey, George, where you been? He says, I graduated. I'm in a higher dimension now. And I said, well, how'd you do that? He says, well, I helped all these souls and I've learned. I've evolved. And I've helped these souls transition, and that's kind of how we do it. We learn and experience, and as we learn and experience, we evolve higher. And so this whole thing is quite fascinating to me, and I'm just now starting to get into following these soul groups back and trying to learn more and more about, and after, what do we do if we decide we don't want to come back to this third dimensional plane? And I'm finding that there's more souls that don't want to come back. They're kind of tired of the rat race, and they kind of would like to just either move on to some other place or just stay up there in the higher realms and not have to be bothered with mankind.
Yeah, can't blame them for that.
No.
My experience has been very similar to what you described there, except that one time I was researching the Vikings, researching the book that I was writing, and in the course of following these Vikings, of course, some of them got killed, and I went into this altered state of consciousness, and because I was curious about what happens to them. They all talk about Valhalla, mm-hmm. and how great Valhalla is going to be. So I went with them and crossed over to observe Valhalla, and sure enough, there they were in a great hall, Valhalla, and they were fighting and raging and raping and doing all of the things that they love to do here on Earth. But it was a transition zone very soon. It's like they learned, well, okay, that was fun. Now we got that out of our blood, we can go on. And they went into a region like what you're talking about there that didn't have a thing to do with their history or anything, but it was a higher state of consciousness where they left behind their earth plane consciousness. So I got curious and wandered around a little bit and into other halfway houses, so to speak, and there was dozens of them, like the Christians that just know where they're going to go, these congregations like you're talking about. Sure enough, there they are, working through their stuff, learning as well, maybe it's not all what it was cracked up to be, and going on into higher levels of understanding. And that was quite revealing to me, because it says that we create our realities, and in our joint consciousness we can create communal heavens and experiences and things like that too, afterlife experiences, transition experiences. So it's just like you said, it's what do you want? What do you expect?
All about learning. It's like, the Christian experience. So you go up there and you meet Jesus, and I channeled with Jesus for 6 months. I went through the whole New Testament with him, and I asked him, did you write this? Did you write that? He says, no, I never wrote that, but I wrote this. I said, what was the point of you coming down to earth? He says, to teach unconditional love. Mm-hmm. He was an ascended master, and so when those people get up into that state and they find Jesus and they learn the whole message was about unconditional love, and then what are they going to do next? They're not going to sit there and go to church for the rest of their life. They're going to have to figure out something else to do with their soul, so they move on.
Well, they have to go get ready to reincarnate again somewhere, and possibly another star system. Who knows?
Well, I don't know. I haven't got that far yet.
Well, make sure you got a return ticket when you do.
Well, I always ask, I got this angel named Gabriel. I said, make sure you keep the door open, man.
Yeah.
I'll have to have my wife call Frank and say, Rich is mumbling in the corner for the last 2 weeks. Can you help him out?
Okay.
Yeah, I have another one. The Book of the Dead, when you say bring them to the Book of the Dead, what is that Book of the Dead, and what does that mean? Well,
in the consciousness of thousands of years of people who, when someone dies, certain people take the responsibility for caring for the bodies or making sure they go to the spirit land or whatever, according to whatever their traditions are. And in that process, thousands of years ago, the Tibetans developed a process called the Book of the Dead to help the Buddhist people in that right and honorable transition and to clear them of all their negativity so they could pass easily and freely. And that's kind of set into their consciousness over there of the Buddhists. And I observed it in Egypt. When we went into the tombs there, I observed having been there in past lives, apparently, I observed the writings on the tomb walls that explained the process of what they went through as they were doing it, and I could understand that writing. I don't know how, but I did, and I fully downloaded that process. For them, takes 72 days or longer. But the realization came to me that it can be done in just a matter of a minute or less if you understand the process and how it works. And this is the process of clearing and doing the Book of the Dead, because once you mention the Book of the Dead, this whole process opens up to you, because it's already in the consciousness of our reality out here and being carried forward for thousands of years. When you say, I want to do the Book of the Dead for somebody, they're here. They just appear. And in the subtle energy field, and it, depending on what your orientation is, what you believe in or been programmed to be, it'll be angels or other dimensional beings that assist the souls as they release from the body, from attachment to the earth plane and third dimensional consciousness. They assist these people in the transition, and it's a beautiful thing to witness. And that sudden realization, well, I'm dead. I realize I'm dead now, or these angels wouldn't be appearing, so I can go. Now, many times I've observed that they can and do ask to stay around for a while if they have the realization, because they want to comfort their relatives and whatnot. So I never do it until they're ready. I always say, in your own proper space and time, simply point your attention toward the transition beings, and they will be here to help you. And that will release those when they're ready to go. Those that are locked in that aren't aware they're dead, like the low self beings and things like that, low self souls, and even some high self souls that die of sudden traumatic shock, they get shocked into this physical reality, and they don't realize they're dead. They're wandering around, wondering why nobody will talk to them, and they can be very intrusive. Some get locked into a because of familiarity and energetic resonance. They get locked into a home or a place like that that seems to support them because of the programming they have in Earth mind that sustains them and gives them a sense of reality. But once you mention the Book of the Dead and offer to help them across, they take right off too. We had an experience just in November or December, wasn't it, Rich, that you came to my house and I told you about somebody that kept coming in my bedroom door and talking to me, and I couldn't understand what they said. And I hadn't really tried to take them over because I hadn't figured out what they were yet. And they'd wake me up, but that didn't bother me that much. But you worked with those and quickly realized that the reason I couldn't understand what they were saying is they were German, and they had been the original homesteaders here in the house where I live in this area, and they were just wondering what I was doing in their home. And so Rich picked them up and took them on, and I haven't had an experience since, Rich, and thank you for that.
Yeah, there was also that other guy that showed up. He was a character. He had been you had another guy. He'd come over to be a gold miner, and somebody shot him and killed him. And he was upset. First thing he started doing was cussing at me and swearing at me and all kinds of stuff. And I had to calm him down and tell him to behave himself. And that was quite an experience. But that's common, when people die, and especially when somebody's killed like that, they're in a fight. killed. They're angry and, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Without fail, every new house that Jane and I moved into, there would be a welcoming committee. People pounding on the walls, sound like it's from outside, or things being knocked over and cupboard doors slamming, things like that. And every time I'd realize it was the neighborhood poltergeist welcoming us, so I just pick them up and send them on their way, and we'd have no more problems.